Okay, let's get started. As you can see here, I got a super basic little HTML setup and my little loading function to bring in the data. And now we got to do something with that data. So let's go ahead and first we're going to talk about map, which is a way to really just manipulate an array. And in this case, we're manipulating that array so that we can display it inside of this names unordered list here. Now to do that, I'm actually I've created an empty array here just as a kind of global variable. And we're going to just set response, the array that we get back, we're going to just set it equal to rows. But we want to actually manipulate it so that it uses the map function. Now the map method, it's not really a function, it's a method that you can run on arrays. So responses are array, and then map is going to take in a function with two parameters, generally two parameters. You really only need to pass in one, depending. And the first parameter is going to be the element in the array. The second is going to be the index in the array. And then you can actually pass in the array itself too, if you need to. But we're not going to worry about that. Actually, we're only going to worry about the element for right now. So every element in the array, we are going to run this function on. And the function that we are going to run, because you'll notice I've got this list of names that I'm returning, and I've got last name, first name. And I don't want to display them as last name, comma, first name. I want to display them as first name space last name. So I'm going to return, and let's just concatenate these with, sorry, I said row, but we're going to use element, the one index plus a space plus element 0. And that gives us rows with the first name space last name. Now to actually put them onto the page, you'll see I created this UL names reference. We're just using regular old JavaScript here, and we're going to set the inner HTML equal to rows. Cannot type. Rows.map, and again we put in that function, and this time I'm going to call it row because we're going to say each row, and we're going to return. It's going to be a list element. Let's say li plus row plus closing li, and at the end we actually want to join it together, otherwise it'll show up with a comma. Like if you just allow the HTML to handle it itself, it just shows up as a comma. So let's go ahead and look at some test data here. And there we go, we got all of those names showing up, first name, space, last name. Now I've got this filter rows here, and I want to type in, just as I type, I want it to filter down these names. You'll see I've got a couple of Oscars in there. I think there's like a couple of Julias. And we should be able to filter down our list just by typing. So to do that, I don't need I have two of these open. Where am I here? So to do that, I already have a reference to my input filter. And now that we have some rows here, I'm going to add an event listener. Input filter dot add event listener. And we're going to call it the input. So whenever anything is input into that text box, we're going to run this function, which takes an event parameter, and I'm just going to reference it as E. We could call it EVT. Sometimes you'll see people reference that as EVT. No problem. Doesn't matter what you call it, as long as it makes sense to you. Generally, the clearer, the better. It makes more sense to use common names. So we need to get the filter itself, and that's going to be equal to the event that I just declared there, and target and .value. So whatever you've typed in to that box is going to show up as our filter. And then we need to actually get a filtered array. We'll call it filtered array equals, and we want to pass in the rows dot filter. Actually takes in the same parameters. It'll be just the element, the index, and then the array itself. But we only need the element here. We're going to just pass, just to keep everything consistent, I'm going to just call it row. And we're going to filter, we're going to consider every element in the array is going to be a row itself. Now remember, every element is just a name. So we want to test, so the difference that you're going to get with map and filter here, where am I, filter, is that the mapping function is going to manipulate the data so that you've got, here I'm just reversing them and adding in a space, right? But in the filter, it's going to return either true or false. And if it's true, we're going to keep the element. And if it's false, we're tossing away the element. So we need to create an expression here that returns either true or false. And what we're going to do is we're going to say row.to lowercase. We want to make sure that we're not case sensitive. And it includes the filter. Now, includes is a string method from ES6, and so it's kind of a newer thing. And you'll notice I'm in an HTML file here in my Google Apps Script project, not in .gs. If we were in a Google Script file, we couldn't use includes. It's not part of the specification. And that is going to return, basically all includes does is it tests to see if this string is in this string. And if it is, it's going to be true. And if it's not, it's going to be false. That's all this returns. So we're going to return that, and that is going to filter us down just the way that, exactly the way we're looking for. And then we can go ahead and set the UL names inner HTML to equal, we're going to equal filtered array, and we're going to actually run the exact same thing. Whoa, overwrote myself there. And re-indent, and that should now, let's refresh and see if I can filter this down a little bit. And there we go. I type in Oscar, it limits me down. If I keep going, it's not case sensitive. I can do Oscar. Is case sensitive, and I've realized because I did not set this to lowercase. You want to make sure that what you're testing and what you're testing against are both going to be either lowercase, or you can even do uppercase. Doesn't matter, as long as you make sure that they're the same. And that way, you know how we should be case sensitive. Case insensitive, I should say. Oscar Potter. There we go. Perfect. So that's a real simple demonstration of filtering and mapping methods on arrays. Have fun coding.